Well, just made it back to the truck after the evening hunt here. It is December 31st, last day of 2019. Thankfully, Iowa's deer season goes until January 10th, so I still got some time to hunt. But as 2019 is coming to an end, in this video, we're going to talk about some of the lessons that we've learned this past season. Okay, lesson number one has to do with the value of being a mobile hunter. Over the past 5-6 years, we've really refined our public land mobile hunting setup, going from really heavy, clunky stands and sticks and camera arms. And now we've gone to primarily hunting out of tree saddles, which is an ultra lightweight system. We're carrying anywhere from maybe 5 to 10 pounds, whereas before we were carrying anywhere from 25 to 40 pounds. So it's just a huge difference in mobility and allows us to be more effective, go farther, and to hunt more comfortably and hunt harder. And the early season hunt that we did in Missouri was a good example of utilizing this system. Ted and Dylan were hunting an area that was new to them, and what they would do is just scout their way in, wearing the tree saddles. They had all the gear they needed to set up, and they could cover ground efficiently until they found the sign that they were looking for and they wanted to set up on. In Dylan's case, it worked out that they could set up on the ground, and Dylan made a great shot on his first public land bow buck. A couple days later, they were doing the exact same thing. This time they found a good setup to get up in the tree with the saddles. Not long after getting up in the tree, Ted gets his opportunity at a mature public land Missouri buck. So this was just a great example of how we utilize a lightweight system to scout our way in, find the sign we're looking for, and have the flexibility to either get up in a tree if the situation calls for it, or hunt off the ground. So if you're looking into being a more mobile hunter, or at least having that option for a setup, I would highly recommend looking into tree saddles. It takes a little bit of getting used to, but once you're familiar with it and how it works, it will change the way you hunt and allow you to be more mobile and more effective. Okay, on to lesson number two. This also has to do with being mobile, but more so when it comes to driving around and finding deer, scouting from the vehicle. And when we travel and go into these hunts, obviously we're scouting when we get there, getting familiar with the topography, with the land. And we've found so many times that throughout the course of the hunt, if we're not finding deer, if we're not finding hot sign, just not finding what we're looking for, by getting back in the vehicle and driving around, in the morning and the evenings when deer are more active, it can really pay off in a big way. And a perfect example of making the most of that scouting, that windshield time, if you want to call it that, is when we were in North Dakota. We had a couple mornings in a row where we just weren't seeing many deer, so Jake spent that time driving around, locating deer in different areas, and happened to spot 2 really big bucks in a canola field. After making sure it was legal to hunt on that property, he made a game plan to get in close. He found the buck, stayed with him throughout the day, and 7 hours after first spotting him from the road, the buck walked within 10 yards and Jake made a perfect shot, and it was an absolutely incredible hunt. But he would have never known that buck was in that area if he wasn't spending time driving around and scouting, instead of kind of beating his head against the wall in the spots that he had been hunting where he just wasn't getting into deer. And this also can be incredibly effective during the rut. Jake basically did the same thing in Kansas, driving around during the morning when they just weren't having much luck getting on deer. So instead of just sitting in the tree hoping for a buck to walk by, they got in the vehicle and located a buck on public land where Jake was able to stalk the buck and get a close range shot and put down his second buck of the year that came as a direct result of scouting from the road and being mobile. Okay, the third lesson that I want to touch on is the stigma around the lockdown phase of the rut, that middle of the month time period where the peak number of does are in estrus and the bucks are spending less time cruising and more time tending and breeding does. Some people will find this a tough time to see bucks or get opportunities at bucks because they just keep hunting the same areas over and over, the same rut funnels. And we used to do that a lot too. But what we found is by concentrating on areas where a mature buck is going to push a doe in heat to, he wants to get her away from the high concentration areas of deer, because obviously a doe in heat is going to attract a lot of interest from other bucks. And he's likely to push her into an area where there's lower deer numbers and probably in an area where it makes it harder for other bucks to get downwind. So during the middle of the month, that's our strategy for finding and hunting mature bucks. And then about the 20th through the 22nd, we tend to hunt closer to bedding areas again. As bucks have tended and bred does, they're moving on, looking for another doe in heat. And at that time, we start going back to the areas, hunting bedding areas where we've known that there was a number of does in there throughout the course of the season. And that's how I ended up getting an opportunity at a really nice 8-pointer on November 20th. He was cruising the downwind side of a bedding area, looking for another doe in heat, and he gave me a perfect quartering away shot at 15 yards. So that's it. That's a wrap for the 2019 season, and those are a few of the lessons that we've learned along the way, and we appreciate you guys following along with us.